does Charter 08 play in this transition? In China or any other country, three conditions must be present at the same time for a peaceful transition to democracy to occur. A viable opposition, a crisis, and international support. 100 years ago, China experienced a serious political crisis and it also enjoyed a viable democratic opposition led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Unfortunately, there was no international support. This caused Dr. Sun to turn to Lenin in 1970, a fateful and disastrous turn of events for China and the world. Many of us in this room vividly recall the pro-democracy movement of 1989. A viable opposition had formed, and a crisis was clear and present. 1 million students and sympathizers gathered around the Goddess of Democracy statue erected in the middle of Tiananmen Square. The likeness of this statue adorns the victims of communist memorial here on Massachusetts Avenue. In addition, numerous smaller demonstrations were erupting in cities across China. Again, the third component, the international support needed, failed to materialize. We can easily draw from these two examples an understanding of how the three conditions of a viable opposition, a crisis, and the international support must interplay for our desired outcome of a peaceful transition to democracy. International pressure in and of itself cannot and should not bring about democracy. The desire for democracy must come from the hearts of Chinese citizens. This desire must be distilled into a viable opposition that is distinctly and undeniably homegrown. But as we have seen from the above two examples, international support provides the critical counterweight which tilts the outcome in the right direction. The lack of international support proved tragic for our countrymen in 1989. But on the positive side, the wonderfully orchestrated support of the Western world, and in particular of Pope John Paul, provided the final nudge that brought the swift collapse of the communist regime in Poland and gave the birth of democracy there. Then, what significance is Charter 08 bring to make up the three conditions I have just elaborated? Charter 08 has three significant attributes. First is its authorship. It is 100% homegrown with an impeccable pedigree. The original 303 signatories are all widely known and respected citizens of China. In addition to the original signatories, almost 9,000 Chinese citizens have affixed their real names to Charter 08. This number should not be underestimated. How many of us in this room would sign such a petition with the full knowledge that in so doing we are putting our jobs or even freedoms at risk? This fact renders moot any contention by the CCP that Charter 08 is the rumbling of subversives or the work of outside agitators. It also renders as absurd that the assertion that the desire for freedom and democracy really does not exist in China. The second important fact about Charter 08 is that it is a clear and detailed roadmap for achieving the goal of peaceful transition to democracy. It is a cogent and factual description of the problems, as well as the solution. I quote from the opening remarks of Charter 08. The Chinese people who have endured human rights disasters and uncountable struggles now see clearly that freedom, equality, and human rights are universal values of humankind, and that democracy and constitutional government are the fundamental framework for protecting these values. By departing from these values, the Chinese government's approach to modernization has proven disastrous. It has stripped people of their rights, destroyed their dignity, and corrupted normal human intercourse. End of quote. Charter 08 goes beyond describing the situation. It details 19 specific recommendations for peaceful constitutional reform. So Charter 08 is not only a homegrown and unequivocal call for democratic reform, it is also a roadmap for achieving that reform. It is the basis for discussion and dialogue with the CCP regime. And lastly, because it is homegrown and because it has attracted such widespread endorsement, Charter 08 is now a catalyst for the formation of a viable opposition. Remember that a viable opposition is the first condition for democracy to take a hold. There now exists a body politic of almost 9,000 people who have gathered around a common principle for forming a democratic alternative to the current one-party dictatorship. And I assure you that the number is growing every day, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Not since 1989 have the forces for democracy so visibly formed inside China. It is therefore not surprising that the communist government has reacted so swiftly by arresting Liu Xiaobo, putting numerous others under city arrest, intimidating almost everyone involved, and desperately attempting to remove any trace of Charter 08 from the internet. The CCP knows all too well that this is most fearful of organized viable opposition, one of the conditions for the peaceful transition to democracy. A crisis. The second condition for democratic reform is also taking shape. Virtually, the only support propping up the Chinese government is its claim of creating economic prosperity. This support is rapidly eroding. The economic downturn is producing an army of unemployed workers and disaffected peasants all across China. As the economic situation worsens, the Chinese government's credibility will rapidly dissipate. The swamp will be drained, if you will, laying bare the underlying frustrations, grievances, and contempt for the CCP. Recognizing that they have nothing to lose, people will become bolder and bolder in publicly expressing their dissatisfaction. Charter 08